is 6:03.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
District Commission Statement, the mission of the Exeter West Greenwich Regional School District is to empower students to read, reach, and succeed. Now, the open forum, it's 3-minute time limit per individual, 15-minute maximum time allowed for the open forum. Comments must be directed to the chairperson of the school committee or terminated discussion. No comment should address personnel, litigation, or negotiations as restricted by the open meetings regulations. The school committee cannot take action or vote on topics introduced that are not reflected on the agenda. Do we have anyone who would like to speak? Okay, then we can proceed. Let's just go over it.
Okay, a short consent agenda. We have the regular meeting minutes from January 11th. We also have executive session minutes from January 11th. There were some minor revisions that were made and sent to everyone yesterday. We have 2 athletic and extracurricular resignations, our monthly bills, and 1 homeschool agreement.
Anyone want to pull anything? Now, I'll entertain a motion to approve the second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Correspondence items?
There's
No, there is none. Monthly subcommittee report, the policy subcommittee.
So the only activity were the policies that were approved at the last meeting, which have been shared out to the town.
How about the building committee?
Report at this time?
Yep.
No.
Technology committee.
We haven't met.
Raising my
The
hand.
big thing is next.
New business, the fund balance presentation.
So this is I have to get up to the computer and do the presentation. Okay, so am I supposed to be muted, Jeremy? Yeah. We're listening to the audio. Okay, all right, great. So we've done this many times in the past for our members of the school committee that have been around for a while, but periodically we meet to go through and update our fund balances. We have a bunch of different accounts outside of the normal operating budget. And we use those accounts for a variety of reasons. We have balances that we're required to keep per policy. And so periodically, we just want to report to the school committee on where we stand relative to those accounts. And typically around this time, we also will sometimes seek permission to move money from fund balance to accounts so that we can fund certain projects that come up. So that's what this is all about, just to kind of give you a status report on where we are. And I'm going to start really quickly with the current fiscal year 2022, that's the 21-22 school year. And so in our fund balance, this is per the draft of the audit, which it's not finalized yet, but this is the number from the draft audit, we are looking at just about $2 million. Okay. However, of that $2 million, we are required by school committee policy to keep 2% in the event of, some kind of a major emergency, something comes up. We always want to have money available to address that emergency situation. School committee policy requires it. So I am using the actual school committee and town approved budget of $33,701,225. 2% of that is roughly $674,000. So that is not available for us to use out of that $2 million that we started. Okay. Then on a monthly basis, Bob produces a status report for the school committee on where we stand for the current year's budget. On January 11th, he presented his report showing that we are projecting, and it's still early, this is going to change on a monthly basis, but we are projecting an end of year balance on the positive side of $54,558. I will update this on a monthly basis, but at the end of this fiscal year, anything that is left over drops into the unassigned fund balance as funds available for us to move for other projects. Okay. Also, in the 2021-22 budget, our current year budget, the school committee on February 23rd of 21 adopted a budget that put $250,000 as a revenue into the budget for the current year so that we could balance it out, right? So that money came out of the unassigned fund balance and it was not accounted for in the audit. That's one of the things that we confirmed at our multi-hour meeting that we had last week, right? So that $250,000 in essence has already been assigned for the current year as a revenue, and anything that we assign as a revenue means that it's not sent forward to the taxpayers. In other words, that's $250,000 that they were not responsible for. Right? Then we are going to ask for some funds out of the unassigned fund balance to be committed this evening, but I'll talk about those when I give you the update on those individual funds in a minute. So let's suppose that $300,000 in total is committed. That would be $300,000 of the unassigned fund balance, and that would still leave us with $828,625 that we have the capacity to utilize for a variety of reasons. For example, as we move forward with the budget process for FY23, the school committee could decide that some of that money goes in as a revenue to offset the expense to the town, just like they did in the 21 school year for the 22 budget. Okay, but we still are in a really good place, even if these commitments are made this evening. They haven't been made. I haven't even presented what they're for yet. Okay, any questions on that side? Okay, so then it's very early to start thinking about fiscal year 23, but basically we would go into fiscal year 23 if nothing else happens, if no other commitments or assignments or anything else is done. We would have this money as unassigned fund balance plus the money that we have set aside for the required minimum balance, and that would be our starting point for next year. We would still need to commit, or we would still need to maintain that minimum balance of 2%. That number will change if the budget that's approved changes, but then there's no other activity yet for fiscal year 23, but we'll continue to update it as things happen along the way. Okay, so that's it for the whole left side. Now the good stuff. So let's start with the capital housing aid. So there's not a lot of information here, and it's a pretty complex story right now, but I'm gonna really try to simplify it. We know that there is going to be money available for carryover from FY21. We were anticipating at the end of last fiscal year about $400,000 in that account. So that's used for a variety of different projects. I know one of the things on the horizon is the communication system at Metcalf, and we've talked about that before, right? However, also what flows through this account is the money that we received from the state, the upfront money that we received from the state, the PAYGO, for our bond projects. And so what happens with that money, actually, we didn't actually get that money. We have to spend the money first, and then we get reimbursed with the PAYGO money. So we've actually utilized this account to pay for projects, portions of the project that are actually funded by the bond. And then we're submitting for reimbursement for the cost of those, which is what we're supposed to do. And that money comes back to us and drops back into the account. The problem we have is that at the time of the changeover of the fiscal year, that account was in the negative because we had paid for things and not yet been reimbursed for them. So we're in the process of getting that all settled as this HVAC system has pretty much come to a close. And so we're not ready yet to report confidently on a balance, but just know that there is a balance. Plus, we are also going to receive our 60+% reimbursement for the projects that we did in the 2021 school year, which were the boiler at Raoul and the safety project at Metcalf. And we know that we are going to receive in this year, we've already gotten about half of it, $128,940. So on top of the balance that we're carrying in, we are expecting $128,940 in reimbursements for those projects that we did in 2021. And that will give us a sufficient balance for now for any projects that we might want to do. And really what's on the horizon besides the projects in the capital plan is the Metcalf communication system. So that will come at a later time. Okay? And that was confusing for us. It took us a long time to get there, but I try to simplify it. Any questions on that? Good. Okay. All right, so let's go to the next account. The next account is the OPEB account. So the history of this is that in 2016, the school committee voted on January 27th to move money into what was called an other post-employment benefit trust. Okay. So that happened in 2016. The reason for this is to start establishing an account where we could begin to offset some of the post-employment benefit costs that obviously we incur on an annual basis. We didn't do anything with that account from 2016 until just before the start of this fiscal year. And so in February of 2021, the school committee voted to reverse that commitment. And then they immediately committed the money to an OPEB reserve. So there's just a real difference between a trust fund and a reserve fund. The reserve fund gives us a lot more flexibility to utilize the money internally, which is actually what we did. So last year, in addition to that $275,000, we withdrew some money from the WB, that's the healthcare system that we have, that they manage the healthcare. And when at the end of the year, expenses don't equal what we put in, there's a balance at the end. We have utilized that balance in the past for a variety of reasons, but we are only looking to utilize that money for healthcare related costs. The strategy last year was to withdraw, put it into the OPEB reserve. So we had a good chunk of money there, and then begin to assign money from that account to offset the cost of retiree healthcare in the budget for the current year. And the way that we did it, so all that happened in February of 21. We withdrew $500,000, deposited it in that account. So we had $275 that was in the trust, reversed, put into the reserve. The $500,000 from the WB put into the reserve. That gave us a balance of $775,000, which is a decent amount. And then the retirement costs, we decided, we used to just carry them in the local budget. We decided that we would do a 60-40 split. So for an extended period of time, if we continue to fund this, we could pay for the retiree costs 60% out of the reserve. And instead of putting 100% into the local budget, we would budget for 40%. That's the strategy that we started last year. Okay? So all of that up to this point right here is stuff that happened last year and before. Okay. We are hoping to continue with that strategy. We didn't put it on the agenda, so postpone this school committee vote to February. I think it's 9th, right? Is that our next meeting? Okay. So because of the balance that we have in the WB, we have we can recommend that an additional 400 come out of there, replenish the reserve so that we can continue to fund post-employment healthcare costs. And right, because we're replenishing the 165,000 that we took out last year, which represented 60% of our healthcare costs. We're going to put $400,000 in, and then 60% of this year's retirement costs. You notice that they have gone up pretty significantly, and it's because, as you have seen over the past several school committee meetings, we have a number of new retirees school year, right after the conclusion of this school year. So we calculated what the expected post-employment benefit cost would be. 60% is this. If we do this withdrawal from the WB, an assignment from the OPEB reserve as a revenue to the budget that we're producing for FY23, that will be an additional $226,468 revenue that goes into the budget. And that's an additional, therefore, almost $250,000 that doesn't get pushed to the taxpayers. Right? So, but that will have to happen at the next meeting because, you know, all the chaos of the week. We put a lot of votes on the agenda, but we forgot these two, so we'll just put it on next week. It's not a big deal. Right? If you guys are open to that, that's the strategy that we started. And then we also have a capital reserve school improvement fund. So this sounds a lot like that initial fund that I described, except for this fund, these are things that we would pay for that are not reimbursable by the state. So we don't want to pay for things in this line that if we paid for them out of the first one, which is called Capital Housing Aid Fund, that we could submit for a 60+% reimbursement from the state. But there are things that come up, repairs, things that come up on a regular basis, that it is nice for us to have funding to offset some of those costs. So last year in June, let me just start at the top. So our balance at the start of this year is $59,186. We are going to ask, and it's one of the proposed votes on the school committee agenda, to move $150,000 in from the unassigned fund balance so that we can cover these unanticipated costs, and some of them are anticipated actually. And then in June of last year, the school committee took action to fund these 4 things: the water treatment plan, the water tank inspections, the data center backup unit upgrade, and the LED signage in the front of the junior senior high school, to the tune of $40,000 in total. There were a few other projects as well, but those other projects have been completed and billed and paid for. So they're already accounted for in the balance. However, the $40,000 worth of projects, some of them are done, but not billed and paid yet. So they haven't really hit this account. So these $40,000 worth of projects were approved, but the money hasn't been withdrawn from the account yet. So we have to account for it here. But even though we're starting with a $59,000 balance, really the school committee has already authorized $40,000 of expenditures. Okay. And then the next 3 are things that when we were doing our analysis of the budget, the requests for next year's budget, we identified items that existed in the FY23 request that are really not recurring annual expenses that were appropriate for this line. So in essence, we could take money from unassigned fund balance, which is, we have a good balance at this point, assign it to this account, and then with your vote, we can pull these three items out of the requests for the FY23 budget as we continue to, whittle down that amount to a reasonable place. And those requests are a commercial dishwasher for the culinary program at the senior high school, $5,100. Filtering shades for the classrooms at Wawaloon. There's nothing that's been done to upgrade what's covering those windows since I think the building was built. And then there are some cafeteria tables at Metcalf that are, I would say, at the stage of danger. We need to replace them pretty quickly. So in addition, during FY22, there have been some emergency repairs that we've had to do. And that's what this line is also for, right? As emergencies come up, we can pull money out of this account and take care of those emergencies. That included a deep clean of the sewage system, which we were told needed to be done, and a cooling system for the server room. That was an item that went down that needed to be repaired. I will tell you that there are some other things as well that have come up that it would be nice to have some funding here so we could just take care of it instead of worrying about where the money is coming from. It's not like we can't repair certain things that exist. So with the $150,000 transfer or commitment, if that's what the school committee does, we would account for the things that you've already approved in June. I would be able to tomorrow morning pull these items out of the operating request so that tomorrow night, when we talk about the where we are with the budget, it will be this much lower because I can pull those items out. And we can also take care of these additional expenses and some of the other things that aren't even listed at this point. That would give us a good balance of around $128,000, although that will be reduced based on some of the other emergency situations that have come up. And we feel that the 150 is sufficient to address all of the issues that we have and give us a balance to start next year. Okay, so that's it on that one. And there's one more account. The last account is a capital reserve technology account. We have not had any activity in that account in the current year or actually in the previous year either. However, there are a number of technology related projects. Again, these are not reimbursable, so they're not appropriate for that first line. Anything that can go in that first line where we can get 60% back, we need to put there. Technology projects are not reimbursable. But this is the other $150,000 commitment that we're asking for. And the reason is that there are in the budget draft that was passed out at the, I think just after the holidays. There are a number of projects that are in there that qualify as a capital technology project. These are things that are not annual recurring costs. Like we have leases for the one-to-one computers that are on a cycle of replacement. Those are annual costs that are in our operating budget. They need to stay there. But there are some costs that are not, repeating annual costs that exist, such as the LCD displays. That's something that we're trying to transition to at the junior senior high school because we are paying a lot of money in replacement and repair of the previous technology. You'll see it in the budget all over the place. Replace the projector, repair, replace, get a new bulb. I mean, it adds up a lot. These are more advanced and will require, I'm sure they require maintenance, but less of an ongoing type of maintenance. So this is the plan to transition to the upgraded technology. So in the budget, there's about $26,000 worth of LCD displays as we begin that transition process. If we do this commitment, I can pull that out of the budget for tomorrow as well. Okay. You also, if you went through the budget, you'll see that there's a server and network storage replacement that is a $27,000 expense. I know Jeremy's been trying to replace things, kind of phase in the replacement. So this is a great account through which that money can flow. And again, if we do this, we're paying for it with unassigned funds that's been transferred to the capital technology, and I can pull that request out of the operating budget for FY23. We also have, Melissa's been asking for this at Wallowing for at least the last 4 budgets. We've not given it to her, but it is, the cafeteria is the place where community meetings happen. She's got 2 grade levels. She brings the whole grade level together. She runs various kinds of activities and meetings. It is appropriate. It's nice for her to have it. It's a $4,000 ask. We could do it through this account, and I could pull it out of the budget as well. And then finally, we have been transitioning the old whiteboards at Metcalf into Promethean boards, and we've been doing it 1 grade at a time, and it's taken a long time, and some of the teachers are getting a little bit tired of waiting. So we see this as an opportunity to just finish that transition. There are 3 grade levels left. I think it's 2, 3, and 6 at this point. And so, and by the way, this $57,000 is actually in the budget as a request for 23. So again, if we do this, the school committee takes action, that's an expense I can also pull out of the FY23 ask, which I'll present tomorrow night. Okay. That means at the end of the year, we would still be starting with a small balance, but it is a balance, and we would be taking care of a lot of projects that have been on people's radar for quite some time. So that is where we currently sit with respect to all of these side accounts that exist. Questions? Anything that I missed, Bob?
Very comprehensive, Mr. Superintendent.
Well, that's because we spent 2 days, me and Bob and Tish, locked in the room, going through all the paperwork. I mean, it's really a process. But we can't do it until we have the initial draft of the audit, so we have a starting point. But we're, the 3 of us, after a couple of days of meetings, we all signed off on this, that this is accurate, puts us in a good place. We've gone through the budget extensively to pull out the items that we know are appropriate for these different lines. They're not annual expenses. They shouldn't be part of the operating budget. The operating budget we think of as those recurring annual ongoing costs. So we want to get into the practice of pulling those one-time asks out and putting them where they belong, and not making it part of the maintenance of effort overall operating budget that the town's going to become responsible for forever. So that was our thinking.
So this data center, that's like a physical server that we're buying.
Yeah.
Right now, we run 3 hosts on an ESX cluster, and 1 at Metcalf is like a redundant. So even if the data center is down here, we'd still be able to do DHCP and make the internet work, basically. The servers are on a 6-year life cycle replacement. So I try to replace 1, and then the next year I replace another one, and the next year another one, so that we never have more than 2 servers more than 1 server that isn't supported at any given time. So I buy them in 5 years.
All right. Thanks.
So unless there are any other questions, I could certainly come back to this. I'll stop sharing the screen, but you'll see in the agenda that the next series of votes are consistent with what was just presented here. So if it's something that you're comfortable with, I wouldn't be able to make any of the moves unless I had school committee approval. So that's why that stuff is on the agenda. And then in terms of the OPEB post-employment, that thing that we started last year, that strategy that we started last year, we can put those votes on for the first meeting in February to make those transfers, and then I'll put that in as a revenue in my budget report at that meeting. Okay, all right, thank you. Oh, sorry, Andrea has her hand up. I can see that she has her hand up.
I do have my hand up. Can you hear me, Jim?
Yes. I can hear you, Andrea.
Okay. I'm having a tough time finding these specific items in the binder. I think just because how much is in the binder. Would it be possible to get page numbers of where these items exist, just so I can mark them off and I'm not, pulling
Yeah,
those?
so tomorrow morning, I haven't taken them out yet because I didn't have the approval of the school committee, but tomorrow morning, the first thing that I'll do is go in. I've already highlighted them in my binder, so it's easy. As I delete them from the system, I'll just mark down the pages and I can email them to you guys so you have them in advance of tomorrow night.
Perfect. Thank you.
Welcome. Anybody else, Jeremy? Oh, Wendy. Wendy?
Jim, just a quick question. I know you always go over with the principals, what are absolute necessities and what can wait. So we seem to have a decent amount of money to, I'll say, accomplish the wish list this year. Wowellum had a replacement of area rugs, and I know they do that gradually. And this year it seems to be quite a few classrooms. Is that you think a necessity since we have the money?
So I've met with every principal and every department leader to go through the first pass at the budget. Melissa felt that that was something that was not necessary for this year, that could wait. So we've pulled that out of the budget.
Okay. I'm just thinking since we have the money, it seems like we're doing well with our funding. I mean, it is $5,000, so I don't know. I'm not opposed to doing it.
One of the things that we could do, because this is all great, but I still have a budget that we're working through, and you haven't seen that yet. I mean, you saw the initial draft. There was a lot in there. We have the new bond payment that's going in, so we still have quite a bit of work to do with the budget. And I was thinking that, before we go crazy with this stuff, these are good things, but these are a limited number of things, right? Yep. Before we go too crazy, I really want the school committee to have have an idea of where we are with the budget and what you actually want to do in terms of using some of that additional fund balance to offset the impact to the taxpayers as a revenue assignment. And then you'd know if you have enough money where you're comfortable making another transfer, or if we have the money in there. I mean, we can always revisit this again in June, which we typically do. You remember that in that capital reserve school improvement, we came back to the committee with certain projects at the first meeting in June, because we had a really good understanding of where we were. We knew what the budget was. We knew what the unassigned fund balance revenue assignment was. So we had a really good picture at that point. We can certainly revisit those things then. Or if the school committee says, let's do the rugs, we can add that to, I would guess that would go to school improvement as well. I mean, I'm good with that.
Yep. Nope, that sounds good. And while I'm on, I just want to say thank you very much. The presentation was very thorough and easy to understand. So thank you for that.
Let me I want to clarify one thing, because I said that I would be able to pull all of these things out of the operating budget. So that's a little bit of a falsehood. I just remembered. The Metcalf team only asked for 4 replacement cafeteria tables because they're doing 4 a year. The problem is that I went to see which ones are being replaced and had a conversation with the custodian, and he showed me what he has to contend with on a daily basis for these ones that have been there since the school cafeteria opened. And I did not feel comfortable putting these off for another 2 years. So I put all 12 that he said needed to be replaced in here, but just know that only 4 of them are actually in the budget request for next year. So the total reduction won't be 23,000 from that line because they're only in there one time. But I just want to be clear about that. Okay, that's all I have.
Okay, and if there are no questions, I'll ask for $150,000 from the outside general fund balance to the capital reserve school improvement fund for school improvement expenses. Any question? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And then also, to assign the amount of.
I didn't hear who seconded that.
Oh,
I made the motion, Mike seconded.
My second.
Michael, okay, thank you.
okay, I'll make a motion to assign, to assign the amount of funds necessary but not in excess of the available capital reserve school improvement fund balance for the purposes of funding school improvement projects. Second. Any other discussions? If not, all those in favor, please say
Aye.
Aye.
Ask for a motion at $150,000 from the unassigned general fund balance to the capital reserve computer technology fund for technology improvement. Second,
That's the, that was a 50,000. 2 times.
one is, yeah, just 2 times. One for the
Right.
capital reserve.
Second that.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Lastly, to assign the amount of funds necessary but not in excess of the available capital reserve computer technology fund balance for the purposes of computer technology improvement fund. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you so much. And I didn't say this, but we know the issues that we had with the Prometheus boards that were in the current year's budget. They haven't even arrived yet. So because of all the issues that we have with shipping and supply and so forth, so this transfer can actually happen now. So, lines that this is not specific to FY '23. So we can actually place these orders and hopefully give them enough time to have them in our schools before the school year starts.
We're also exploring alternative vendors. Because it turns out these Promethean boards are actually made by Samsung. And Samsung sells them directly, so we're looking into, they seem to have more availability, so we're checking into it.
Then we'll move to a B. That's to approve of the greenhouse plan. Associated costs of approximately $16,000 for the revised architectural drawings of work.
So this is the conversation that happened at the last school committee meeting. And the agreement was that we wanted an official vote, which we did not have on the agenda. There was consensus that I know was brought to the building committee. Building committee unanimously approved. And so this would just be kind of that formal last step of the school committee to say yes. And we'll go with the plan.
I'll make a motion to approve the modified greenhouse plan.
Madam Chairman,
Yes,
may I request to speak as a community person? Since the time was not fully used up in the open part of the floor meeting. In regards to the greenhouse.
sure.
Thank you. Hi, my name, for those who don't know me, I'm Jim Titus. I was the chairman of the community greenhouse project that we have here today, 2000. I'm here with other community members tonight to voice our concern about the location of the new greenhouse, the unwanted dismantling of the existing greenhouse, and the plausible coexistence of both. We respectfully request that the school committee amend the proposal of the location of the new greenhouse until the community has had a chance to inform, educate, and propose the coexistence of both greenhouses to the school committee at a set time and date. We have a letter drafted, a proposal which we feel will extensively explain the reasons and the educational values of keeping the old greenhouse. We respectfully request an on-site meeting to firsthand visualize what we are discussing, so that the school committee can see firsthand. We are at this point, we will also present the security materials needed to make notice, necessary upgrades to the end wall of the existing greenhouse. And we have $700 in committed funds if there are anything else like an oil burner or anything else for the greenhouse, because it is a 20-year-old fully functional structure at this time. We are okay with going forward with new parking lot revisions and the purchasing of the new greenhouse. So at this time, we are, again, respectfully requesting that the school committee amend that proposal until the community has a chance to bring that forward. Thank you.
I really don't have anything to say at this point regarding, I think they've made their position perfectly well known, and I don't want to frame it up as us, them. You know, I can say this much. Stage 3, with the design as presented to the school committee and the building committee, is on its way to ride for evaluation.
So I will entertain a motion to approve the modified greenhouse plan and associated costs of approximately $16,000 for revised site work and architectural drawings.
I'll second that.
I'll make that motion.
You made the motion.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 And we have a new high school sports offering.
Yeah, so this is SAT preparation courses. It would be a half credit course in math and ELA, and actually is being introduced by request of some of the students who wanted some additional support before they take their SAT. So I think it's a pretty nice sign that it's taking some ownership of what they need and advocate for what they need. So we can put it on as an offering, and then we would obviously run it based on how many people have been signed up for it. Certain type of teachers.
I'll make a motion then to approve the new high school course offering. Math and English departments, SAT prep, and credit course.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, now we get to the budget.
So I'll just say a little bit about it, and then obviously we have a whole meeting dedicated to this tomorrow, so we'll have a much lengthier conversation. We've done a lot of work in looking through the budget, analyzing, identifying duplicate requests. There were some, identifying some of the wants versus needs, identifying projects that could be paid through alternative funds, including what we talked about today, including expenses that could be paid out of Perkins for CTE related activity. Marie has done a lot of work with that. We had some money that was in the budget that could be paid for out of ESSER funds. That's the money that we got from the federal government for COVID related expenses. So we've pulled a lot. We've deleted quite a bit based on duplications and things that we've determined are just not necessary at this point. We've scrubbed the staffing, the benefits. However, we still have work to do because we still don't know for sure all of the staffing that we need. We don't have all the enrollments for elementary. We don't have all the numbers yet for what the kids have signed up for at the high school. And, what we need to run, what staff we need depends on what courses the kids sign up for. That's an annual issue that we have. So we're continuing to kind of work through our process to make sure that we tighten that in places that we know we can. We have put out a request to all of the teachers that are currently on a leave of absence. Remember, we had quite a few that have taken 1 or 2 years off because of COVID and staying home with their children. They're at the point where they have to make a decision now about what they're doing going forward. Are they returning or are they resigning? So those letters went out, and coming up those answers, there'll be an impact as well. So we're on top of that. However, I just want to say that there are 2 areas in the budget that are quite significant in terms of increases, and they are related to gas, price of gas. So the propane and the gas that we use to heat things and so forth and to run our buses has skyrocketed. And for an expense as big as heating the school system and running the buses for the entire year, that adds up pretty quickly. And then the price of oil as well, and the propane gas for the greenhouse, right? Because that would be an expense. So, I'm going to highlight that tomorrow. And that's not something that we've looked at yet. We've projected out based on where we are currently, and it's not a good place. But those areas alone, the bus, the transportation, and the heating and oil costs are about $500,000 just between those 2 things over last year's expenses. And everybody's experiencing that, and there's, I think it's hard for us to say, let's reduce that, because we really don't know what's going to happen to the cost of those things. We'll continue to monitor, and we're not going to get to a place where there's a 0 increase, that's for sure, especially when we're looking at increases in 2 key areas that we can't control based on what's happening nationwide at this point. So just kind of a heads up that we have done a lot of work, and we've done a lot to reduce the initial, but we're still looking at, there's still work to do, and some of it has to do with those 2 areas of major concern. So we'll talk more tomorrow.
Anyone want to talk about your gas?
Yes, tell me about it.
The charter.
Andrea,
Andrea?
Jim, just real quick, when you're talking about the budget for next year, as far as the cost of heat, are we accounting for the replacement of the greenhouse? I know the existing one was oil and the new one's propane, and I believe it's energy efficient. So is that already estimated in here?
So that's actually something that Bob has already talked about. There is a line in the new budget for the propane that is necessary for the new greenhouse.
Mm-hmm.
But we do think that there is room for an adjustment based on the fact that the current greenhouse utilizes a massive amount of heat right now. And the new greenhouse would use less, but the new greenhouse won't be up until halfway through the year. So right now there's like a double budget in there for the greenhouse for about half of the year that we will account for. So Bob's working on that, but it won't be ready for tomorrow night. But we're on top of that, Andrea.
Okay.
I should have figured
All right.
you'd catch that before we brought it up.
So we won't have the new greenhouse up and running for the fall. It will take longer. Is that what we're thinking?
So that was, yeah, I think that was part of the discussion. I don't even remember what meeting we were at. But agreeing to change the original plan meant that we would be looking at a little bit longer time.
Pushing
to
it
get
back.
finalized.
Okay,
But I
I
remember
must
the
have missed that.
teacher- Yeah, the teacher said that the greenhouse is used more so the second half of the year, so that isn't as much of an issue. That's what she said.
I see.
Am I right on that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The greenhouse is only used February to June.
Yeah.
And that's what it's used from mid-February to June. And it's springtime.
Okay,
So
Thank
it
you.
Still fit the timeline for, when they need it. But that was part of the agreement of changing the plan.
okay. And I assume with our new HVAC system, because it is energy efficient, that's already accounted for as well. So
Yeah,
these numbers are still this
so-
high. Okay,
So that's so there'll be two components on the electrical side and then on the electricity consumption and on the fuel oil. And that's really about getting account information from Grid, Direct Energy, TH Malloy, who delivers our #2 fuel for the systems. And then there's another windfall for the district based on school committee action over 2 years ago. And that is what is the net going to be on the solar project once we start receiving the credits for that. So, as the superintendent pointed out, and I like to keep in my head straight, this is a process, not an event, so as we pull that information in and massage it and force people to commit to numbers. It's easy to say, you're gonna save this much money until I say, well, that's what I'm gonna put in my budget. And then they get a little soft about it. So that's really what we're working on right now to all the members of the committee, just firming that stuff up.
I appreciate a conservative, estimate for sure. I wouldn't want to anticipate something without having real concrete evidence of that. So I was just curious to see if that was already anticipated in these numbers. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just curious, how much of that is related to the transportation of school buses?
Zero. The school bus contract is, they own the fuel. So the district doesn't own it, our contract. We get out of the fuel business after the
But
go
there is
through.
an increase in transportation.
Yeah, there's,
Oh,
so,
I understand that, that's why I'm asking.
yeah, no, the propane is not part. The transportation increase really centers around the district taking back the out of district transportation routes. As we exited COVID and the chronic labor shortage at the state level, basically they couldn't move our out of district students, so we took them back, which at the time seemed appropriate simply because as we were coming back to full in school, if you recall last year, the superintendent and the committee and the district, we were running double sessions. But we weren't running the transportation out of the district as much as we are now with a full community going out of district. And right now, the analysis is, is that still a cost leader or is it a cost saver for us? And it's a walk. We just haven't come to a conclusion yet. So what does that mean? In 2020, our out of district transportation was handled by the state. We paid the state to move those students. In 2021 and 22, the migration was in, and in 2022, we are fully moving all of our out-of-district students. The analysis that's taking place is it cheaper for the state to do it or for the district to do it? We just haven't drawn a conclusion yet, simply because it's just a lot of information to
To be
analyze.
clear, we started doing it because the state
Correct,
told us they could.
right.
We
And
didn't have a choice but to do it.
Okay, well, that's all well and good, but I must have misunderstood or misheard, but I thought this $500,000 increase was due to fuel and fuel
So it's fuel
So
for
I'm
here
curious as to why we got this. You know, because one of my concerns when we went to these propane fire buses, propane being the second most expensive fuel plant, was just this. So.
Just to be clear for the record, the district does not purchase fuel for the buses and hasn't since the Gulf War.
fire. Andrea, Heather, Andrea.
Andrea?
Sorry, but I just didn't lower it. Sorry.
Sorry.
Anybody else? Uh, 21-22 return to school guidance update.
I don't have anything new on the charter review. So the only thing that I wanted to report out are the case numbers in the district since the holiday. So I didn't do it by school. I just did the number. So between December 23rd and January 2nd, we were not in school during that time frame. There are 31 reported cases. I'm going to be really careful about my words because these are the cases reported, but I anticipate that there were other cases that were not identified through a state site. They were a home test, never reported to the school, so it's probably an underestimate. The first week back, January 3rd to January 9th, 52 cases district-wide. January 10th to January 16th, 33 cases identified district-wide. And then the 17th through the 23rd, 45 cases. There were 2 clusters that were identified in that time frame. And then this new week started on the 24th, which was yesterday. So as of this meeting, we've only had 2 cases so far this week, positive cases. So that's where we are. I mean, the numbers are still high, but if you do the percentage and match that percentage to the community and the state, it's still significantly lower. But that's where we are. So we haven't seen a steady decline yet, although all indications tell us that we should be seeing it as we enter February. They told us by the first week of February, second week of February, we should start seeing that pretty steadily decrease, and fingers crossed that comes to fruition. That happens, that would be fabulous. Yep.
Capital project update.
The only thing that is, the ATC continues to work with the HVAC system and the deployment. They did during the Martin Luther King holiday, they got all the glycol, which is the, think of it as antifreeze for an HVAC system. They got all that in 1,000 gallons. That took just about 3 working days to get up, drain down the 1,000 gallons and then put in 1,000 gallons of glycol. They continue to do the work and the approved additional work. And so that's the HVAC. And as I reported earlier, the stage 3 for the site, the general contract work and the roof work, those projects have been submitted to RIDE and are under evaluation, with the goal of hopefully going out to bid, I think, late April, early May for those projects. No scheduled date at this time for the next meeting.
Thank you. Important dates and meetings. Yeah, it's just um, tomorrow, there's the budget workshop here at 6 o'clock. February 3rd, we have the joint. Tuesday, February, shouldn't it be 8th?
Yeah.
14th. That would be 8th. Maybe the next regular school committee meeting, Tuesday, February 20th. February 22nd will be the second. No executive session this time. So, anyone has anything else to say? We'll entertain a motion to adjourn at 7:04. All those in favor?
Aye.
Hi.